Believe it or not, when I first saw The Parent Trap as a kid, no, not that one, that one.
Surprise!
I was blown away when I learned that these two girls weren't actually twins, or that they were in fact the same person. It's likely that many of you felt the same way when you discovered that Armie Hammer didn't really have a twin in The Social Network.
No, there's no way. That was amazing how that was done.
Just rode the damn boat.
Filmmakers have been fooling audiences with this gimmick throughout the course of cinema, because the techniques and innovations behind this effect have evolved as audiences have grown more sophisticated. But regardless of whether or not a filmmaker is trying to fool anyone, this easily has to be one of the most common visual effects there is.
Two of them?
You're just one of us.
Just one!
Must be seeing things.
Are you me?
You are not you. You're me.
This video is going to break down the evolution of this effect. So here we go. Here's how filmmakers have captured the same actor on screen with themselves at the same time. This is Creating Doubles, the split screen and beyond. Now, before we dive into the technical aspect, some of you might be wondering, why not just cast actual twins? Well, in several instances, filmmakers still do cast twins.
Hello, President Scrooge.
It just so happens that Linda Hamilton has an identical twin.
There's a part where they're two Sarah Connors, so I suggested to them that they use my sister instead of doing the process work.
Yeah.
The security guards are also twins. With that being said, for whatever reason, having the same actor playing dual roles is a deeply impactful storytelling device. Just think how different The Wizard of Oz would have been if the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion hadn't also been played by the farmhands in Kansas. And you were there, and you were there, and you were there.
And you were there.
Without these recurring faces and characters, the story wouldn't have the same emotional impact.
Are you handsome?
You'll find that actors often play dual roles in stories about duality.
You're the enemy within.
The most obvious example would be Jekyll and Hyde. The basis of the whole story is seeing one actor physically change from one character
Mr. Buddy Love.
into another. And with that, actors from time to time have to confront themselves.
I'm badass, and you're good ass.
It was very scary for me to play both the hero and the villain.
Actors also often play dual roles in comedy.
Bogus.
Good Lord, I've heard about this cat juggling.
From Peter Sellers in Doctor Strangelove to Eddie Murphy.
I'm Eddie Murphy.
Excuse me. Hey, it's Kunta Kinte!
Yeah, pretty much any Eddie Murphy or Mike Myers movie.
I've farted.
How you doing, Dad?
I'm doing fine.
Dual roles within this genre usually implies that nobody is trying to fool anyone with the effect, and that the laughs come from the audience being in on the joke, and watching these actors just do their thing. Now, should the actor need to be on screen with themselves, the most common way to do it, without any visual effects, is to use a body double.
He uses a double. No. It's too simple. This is a complex illusion. The only way that I know how to do it is to find you a bloody good double.
Doubles are an essential element to creating this illusion that's very effective and still used to this day. A double is typically used to play opposite the actor in any shots that are filmed from behind or over the shoulder.
I'm probably Jack farthest from the camera.
Or extreme wides where it's less obvious that they're not the same person because they're out of focus or whatever. We'll come back to body doubles, but first let's move on to...
Wait a second.
The design is based on Rick's father-in-law. I actually used him to double the guy. He's in a couple of shots.
Aha! Aha!
Masks. Masks are another option filmmakers have used that also don't require any other visual effects. In the film Being John Malkovich, director Spike Jonze alternated body doubles and masks with the real John Malkovich throughout this whole bizarre Malkovich. Malkovich. Speaking of bizarre, who could forget the masks made for those Aphex Twin music videos? And The Matrix Revolution created over 50 masks for background extras, and they were in charge of operating 100 dummy heads for all the Agent Smith mannequins.
They all have handles in the back, which are operated by one extra, operates 2 Hugos.
It's also worth mentioning that many films have created masks for actors' stand-ins and stunt doubles.
As the character Phil played, he kind of jumps up through these rafters and goes up. He was wearing as a stunt guy in a mask.
And then there's Arnold. Despite the fact that he's probably the most consistently cloned actor of all time,
You know, you're the best celebrity lookalike I've ever seen.
his stunt doubles, Billy Lucas and Peter Kent, went through several hours of makeup each day to apply a facial prosthetic to perform stunts like these. What's up, Billy? And for this shot specifically, for the Blu-ray, they've gone back and digitally replaced Peter's head with Arnold's. But before we get into those kinds of visual effects, first we have to talk about the split screen. Now, the split screen is pretty much as old as film editing itself. It's a compositing technique that allows you to stitch multiple clips together to show several images at once, where the line is either deliberately visible, or by compositing elements from the same camera setup, creating one singular image, where the line becomes invisible. And although there are great examples of stylized uses of split screen for juxtaposition and montage, we're going to be focusing on the attempts to create the seamless split screen. The earliest example of this effect I can find was experimented with and pioneered by the French illusionist and filmmaker Georges Méliès, who used it on himself for many of his films at the turn of the century. He achieved this by combining multiple exposures in some instances. As you can see, the men on the left gradually get darker as he keeps re-recording over the same strip of film. He also combined this technique with cleverly spliced pieces of film in his other shorts. And it isn't all that complicated once you understand how it works. So what's actually happening to achieve this effect? Well, let's go back to the Parent Trap.
What we would do on the optical printer is we would shoot 2 different exposures. One exposure would be the girl on the left with a matte blacking out the right side so no light hit the film. And then we would shoot a second exposure on the same film with the matte on the left side.
The 2 strips of film were then rephotographed, 1 frame at a time, in a device called an optical printer.
And now what you have is a complete scene.
Get her talking about how she and Daddy first met and their first date. Find out about that first date.
And that's more or less what audiences had grown accustomed to with film, often scanning the frame, looking for the line.
Well done, Mr. Powers.
Now there are several limitations to the split screen that filmmakers had to figure out. One of the main ones being character interaction.
I just want to shake your hand. Will you shake my hand? Show me your hands, man.
Characters couldn't really cross the line and physically interact with themselves.
Let me show you.
Often resulting in very stilted blocking.
These were our parents. Look at them.
If the characters do physically interact, you might see something like this, such as pushing a body double in an over-the-shoulder shot.
Sit down.
Now sit down!
Now, of course, there are several exceptions and solutions to this that filmmakers have come up with over the years, by creatively using body doubles in order to bridge that gap. Going back as far as the silent film era in 1922, Louis Stone shakes his own hand in The Prisoner of Zenda. Now how cool is that? What's happening here is the Stone on the right is shaking hands with the body double, and they've cleverly hid the split on the black sleeve of the other character's wardrobe. And in my opinion, it still holds up. Now let's jump forward 15 years to 1937 when they remade The Prisoner of Zenda, this time for sound. And we get these clever character interactions with both Ronald Colmans.
Well met, cousin. You must forgive me being unduly surprised.
Handshakes as well as other physical contact.
It's all right now, sire. You're safe. Cousin Rudolph.
All of these were achieved by lining up Coleman's chest and torso with another body double. And under scrutiny, you can see the split. But upon first-time viewing, it's still pretty impressive the thought that went into these shots.
Well met, cousin.
We can see these same techniques used again when Bette Davis plays opposite herself in A Stolen Life. Again, using body doubles to create this physical interaction.
What a swell person you were, and what fun you'd had together. Oh.
As you can see, the split screen wasn't always just a hard line down the center of the frame. Intricate mats have been used to create all sorts of clever character interactions. Mwah! Now take a look at this shot in A Stolen Life. Here they used the edge of the chair to create the mat, so that Bette Davis could walk behind herself. As well as lining up her hand with a body double, she's then able to hand herself a match. Watch this.
Why don't you go to Hyannis? Your gang's all there. Not trying to get rid of me, are you?
Don't be silly.
Ugh, I mean, come on. Now, it's easy to take for granted just how simple the act of walking around yourself could be, especially if you're doing it without the help of any green screens or blue screens or anything. Take this shot from the 1970 film The Man Who Haunted Himself, where Roger Moore physically walked around himself.
You made a mistake about that tie. I could have been seen wearing it, but didn't. And that suit. The city accepts certain conventions, you know.
This might not be that impressive by today's standards.
Done this to me. Don't you see?
But this is the earliest pre-digital example of a split-screen mask cutting around Roger Moore to accomplish just that. And again, it's not perfect, it's a little rough around the edges, but it's still a pretty incredible shot given the limitations of the split screen and what audiences had seen up to that point. Now, the other huge limitation for this split screen effect for the longest time was camera movement. All these previous examples had been hindered by the fact that the camera was unable to move, because the slightest movement would throw off the split. That's why when Alec Guinness played 6 roles in Kind Hearts and Cornets, this shot took 2 days to film, and the camera operator reportedly slept next to the camera to make sure it didn't move. Now, filmmakers have simulated camera movement for this effect, using rear projection for example. However, it wasn't until 1988 in David Cronenberg's Dead Ringers that a motion control camera rig was used to precisely replicate the camera movement in order to create the seamless split.
Every twin shot must be filmed twice, with Irons playing first one role and then the other.
This was a motion control shot. We're seeing both halves of the frame. In this shot, we had the two of them walking side by side as the motion control rig was dollying back. And then we used the video to put a hard split in. We keep moving the split around to, accommodate them during the shot.
While we're on the subject of camera movement, that same year Robert Zemeckis released Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where in the making of he always wondered.
There was this sort of rule that you can never move the camera when you're doing animation, which I never understood who made up that rule.
And action.
And this is significant because, like the limitations with the split screen, Zemeckis was never going to allow any previous limitations of mixing live action and animation dictate how he was going to tell the story. And while this film doesn't specifically contain the twin effect, several principles of using doubles, as well as creatively designing specialized rigs, allowed cartoon characters to interact with the physical world around them. For example, in this scene here, a body double is pinching a cheek and interacting with other articles of clothing that will later be animated over. And mechanical devices were made for smashing plates,
No pain, no pain, no pain.
drinking a shot of whiskey, and gesturing with a cigar.
I tell you, Valiant, the whole thing stinks like yesterday's diapers. Look at this.
Now, pulling focus is a relatively normal task for any camera operator to do, but it hadn't been done with animation like this before, so they had to figure it out.
They had to develop a technique for compositing characters in out of focus. And that allowed us to do focus pulls from Jessica, for instance, who when she gets out of the car at the Maroon Studios and turns and looks up to the window, there's a focus pull that is perfectly logical in the grammar of film. And if it wasn't there, the audience would say, oh, there's something wrong with this shot.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit paved the way for Zemeckis to take all those tricks and techniques and apply them to his next project, Back to the Future Part 2, in what might very well be the high watermark in creating doubles with split-screen compositing. Now, this film has it all. Body doubles, character interaction, and like Roger Rabbit, Zemeckis was going to move the camera wherever he needed it to tell the story. So for this, they had to build their own motion control system. And keep in mind, this is all pre-digital, so let's go through it.
You always did have a way with women.
Get the hell out of my car, old man!
One of the most subtle and brilliant moments, in my opinion, is this interaction right here,
Stay down and shut up.
where Michael J. Fox removes the hat from Michael J. Fox. Oh, it's so good.
That's a third actor's arm there that did that. Leaves the frame for just
one frame or two, then comes right back in, and it is just seamless.
There's a great moment where old Biff hands young Biff the sports almanac.
All you gotta do is bet on the winner and you'll never lose.
He hands the book to himself, and when we were previewing that movie, somebody cried out in the audience, "How did they do that?" And I just sat there and I thought, okay, mission accomplished.
It's no simple task to hand an object across a split screen from combined takes with camera movement. So like in Roger Rabbit, a mechanical rig was designed to hold the book and do a precise handoff perfectly timed with the camera as it panned from right to left.
All right, I'll take a look at it.
And remember how they had to pull focus away from an animated character? Well, now they're pulling focus across the split screen.
Marty, whatever happens, you must not let your other self see you. The consequences could be disastrous. Excuse me, sir. Yes, you with the hat.
Who? Me?
Yes. Be a pal, hand me a 5/8 inch wrench out of that toolbox.
On the DVD, there's an extended scene featuring all three Michael J. Fox characters at a dinner table. Originally, it was meant to be one unbroken take, but they cut the scene way down because they felt it was too much of a gimmick.
As cool as it is, that's really all that it is. It's not a scene that's about anything. It doesn't really advance the story or the characters. It's just a show-off shot that allows us to do that.
I felt that this was an important lesson to keep in mind, that the effect should serve the story, and not the other way around. Now before we move on, there's one other alternative to the split screen effect that's used throughout this series, and that's keying. This is simply filming an element against a green screen or a blue screen, and keying out that color. Removing it so you can replace your background with whatever you want. Action! Several shots in part 2 were filmed against a blue screen to create the twin effect as well, where Michael J. Fox is in both the foreground and background elements.
And some of this was done with the VistaGlide camera, and some of it was done blue screen. This, I believe, was blue screen.
Of course, this wasn't the first movie to have done this.
Now step inside and use your body. Like this.
Relax, John. It's all part of the miracle of cloning. Hello, John.
Hello, John.
Hello. Hello, John.
Now just because it's shot on green screen doesn't necessarily make it easier, and motion control is still generally used when there's camera movement. The real benefit is when you have characters overlapping or crossing in front and behind themselves.
Harry, your eyesight really is awful.
Now keying film before things went digital had their own set of limitations in post-production, because there was only so much you could do to clean up the edges, or to avoid subtle mistakes such as a person accidentally walking through themselves.
You see this guy, Tyson?
This is where Ghost deserves an honorable mention here.
Help me, please, help me!
It creatively inverts the fact that this character can't interact with anything. Like for this shot here, they use a motion control rig as he attempts to stop the bad guy. Whether or not these hold up, this was a turning point for visual effects. The final moment is film literally kissing a composite of digital video. Where was I? Oh yes, digital.
You ready? Wait!
Once digital technology became available to filmmakers, the visual effects world entered a new era with infinite possibilities. As far as character interaction goes, we've come a long way from that first handshake. But the principles of using doubles hasn't changed. In order for Michael Keaton to hand himself this plate of food, they used a motion control camera and digitally composited a double's arm onto Michael Keaton's body.
Ooh.
This same technique was used again in Moon.
Burning up. Sweat like a pig.
Or depending on where the bottom of frame is, you can get away with things like this.
I'm crazy!
In this VFX breakdown, you can see how Jake Gyllenhaal's hand and arm are composited where they need to be, just below the frame.
I'm crazy!
Filmmakers are constantly coming up with creative ways to stage these kind of interactions. And digital compositors can seamlessly stitch it all together. And here's how they composited Chris Evans' head onto his stunt double.
Chris will come in and you'll have 3 cameras, and then from that footage you'll build the best angle. And the trick is that you can't just stretch the actor's face to match the stunt double's head. So you end up having to like warp the stunt person's head to match Chris Evans' head and then put his face on it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so easy.
Jurassic Park obviously gets a lot of attention for its revolutionary use of CGI to create the dinosaurs, but it's also one of the first films to digitally replace an actor's face, what's become common practice for creating this twin effect today. In this scene here, when Lex falls through the air duct, her stunt double looks up at the camera, so for that split second they composited Lex's face on top. The Crow is another early example of this effect. When actor Brandon Lee was accidentally killed during production, they used a body double and digital face replacement to complete the film, like for this shot here. When his father Bruce Lee passed away during production on Game of Death, the filmmakers resorted to using a cardboard cutout of Lee's face to complete the scene. Obviously, technology has come a long way since then. Visual effects artists have been able to create human performances in the computer since The Abyss.
We can reconstruct the actor's face and digitize his expressions as you wish. Animate, model, create very realistic, very strong human faces.
As the years go on and the technology keeps getting better, audiences are consistently being fooled all over again, unable to tell if what they're seeing is really the actor or a stunt double. This new era of facial capture and compositing is truly remarkable. Computers are now able to track an actor's face relatively easily, and the animators are able to use the actor's performance shot on set to create whatever kind of character they need to, or to de-age the actor. Yeah, did I mention there were infinite possibilities? And that this is probably the most common visual effect that audiences will continue to see time and time again. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and taking a look at the evolution of this effect. It was fascinating to research, and if you're interested in any more information on this topic, we'll provide links below for related articles, as well as the full VFX breakdowns featured in this video. Lastly, if you want to know what movie any of the clips are from, just turn on closed captioning. Thank you very much for your time, and remember that the effect should serve the story. So in closing, here's David Fincher explaining that sometimes to effectively create doubles, even the stupid little things can make an audience believe they're both really there.
Every freshman is issued one of these, and somewhere in this book it says you can't steal from another student.
It's amazing how these tiny little things can put 2 people in the room. Like, the fact that Tyler just throws the student handbook over to Cameron and Cameron snatches it out of there and walks away. These little stupid things just make them feel more like they're in the same room.
Alright, that's it for today.